Hello and welcome to this Switzer Masterclass. And today we're going to be talking to Stephen Yatomi-Clarke of PTX. And we must remind you, this is an education piece to explain what this company does and to give you an idea of, where the company's heading, what are the challenges and all the sorts of things that you might be interested in. Stephen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Stephen, let's kick off with the most obvious question for people who've never heard of your company before. What is PTX and what does it do?
So Prescient is developing a suite of therapies to target cancer where other therapies have failed. And we've got several different ways of doing that, targeting different cancers using different tools.
Okay. How long has the company been around for?
Well, the company's been around since about 2014. I wasn't there at its inception, but I think it's fair to say it's been transformed really in the last 12 months, especially with this advent of a brand new technology that we find ourselves at the forefront of.
Okay. So what cancers are you after fixing?
So we target a range of blood cancers and solid tumours. In blood cancers, we're looking at leukemias, we're looking at lymphomas, and in solid tumours, we're looking at a variety of different ones. I think the thing that they all have in common, Peter, is that these are therapies, these are cancers where therapies have failed and where the prognosis for these people is sometimes months and where there are no options. So they are very large markets of unmet need, and making a dent in those is going to be very beneficial for patients and represents big market opportunities as well.
Okay. So why don't you tell us what it is that you've brought to market that you think is going to have a real of efficiency in actually dealing with these terrible problems?
Sure. Well, we take a view of we license from the best and work with the best. And the different tools that we do to combat cancer, which is a very slippery beast, is we work on things inside the cell and outside the cell. When it comes to things inside the cell, we target particular rogue proteins which drive the cancer. And if you think of it like this, Peter, if there's a car with a stuck accelerator pedal that is out of control and doesn't know when to stop dividing, we basically target those rogue proteins, unstick the accelerator pedal and apply the brake to kill the cancer in a very personalized way. So we've got two products currently in development that target that, and data looks very encouraging indeed in certain blood cancers. On the outside of the cell, this is where it gets really interesting and might be able to dive down deeper with you later on this call, which is that we are weaponizing the patient's own immune system to target the cancer instead of fighting infection, to recognize and kill the cancer. And this is a whole new wave, a whole new modality, which is really transforming medicine. And so we use both tools to target things inside and outside of the cell.
So how long have you had these processes in the company, and how long have you been testing people? Are you testing on people?
Yeah, indeed. Our first, our targeted therapy is looking at inside the cell. They are in clinical trials now. One of them's been in clinical trials since 2016 and is progressing well in a type of blood cancer. 3 complete responses, complete eradication of disease on that study. That's reading out later this year. The other one, we initiated the study about 2 years ago under the leadership of Professor Miles Prince here in Australia. And we just announced a couple of weeks ago some very encouraging results where some patients would be expected to stay on therapy no longer than 3 to 4 months. There've been one on 12 months, another one for 17 months and counting. So they are currently in the clinic. The immune system type approach, looking at outside the cell, we've only had that asset for a year, just under a year, or just over a year. And that is progressing with purpose at the Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre and in-house at Prescient.
And so I guess a lot of people would like to understand, what are the important milestones that you have to get to to turn the company into something that's profitable with enormous growth potential and so on, because that ultimately is your goal. Of course, you're in the business of helping people, but at the same time, you have to be profitable to keep on doing that. And also, a lot of smaller companies in your space want to prove the method and ultimately be taken over or do a JV with the bigger organization that can make it happen. So for people who've never really heard of you guys before and maybe don't even understand the kind of process you have to go through to materialize a much bigger and more successful company, what is the milestones ahead?
I think so. With our targeted therapies, there are clinical milestones, and they're going to be present in the next few years, or certainly within the next year. So I think that type of business model is typically, as you said, let's prove up a concept and look to partner or JV. We're all about trying to find the quickest route to market, the quickest route to an approvable drug, and with PTX 100 in particular, we can do some clever things by picking on areas of unmet need. And the areas that our drug looks to be working in, that I mentioned before in certain blood cancers, instead of doing these big phase 2, phase 3 trials, which take a very, very long time, we can truncate that right down. It's a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the time to get a drug like that through the approvals required to get to market. And so that's what we're pursuing. And the size of the prize there is, at least in the US, is a $3 billion market where the standard of care just doesn't work very well. There's a drug selling for $500,000 per patient per year that only provides a marginal benefit in 27% of patients. And we believe our drug has a lot more promise than that. The good thing about a truncated pipeline development timeline is that we're not reliant on a third party swooping in. We're happy to entertain conversations, don't get me wrong, but the power is in our hands to take that much deeper to an approvable product, and perhaps even with a small targeted sales force, launch something like that to very particular niche but high value areas. In other aspects of the business, we certainly have a platform that we can license and monetize that a lot sooner. And the value in that case with our immunotherapies happen a lot earlier. So we have the ability to, whilst in parallel develop our programs, monetize it with third parties. So I guess in summary, we have a bunch of different approaches, which is very NPV focused and all about trying to get the straightest line between now and the market, both internally and externally.
A lot of people who are inexperienced in investing in this space get quite surprised at the importance of the Federal Drug Administration and its approvals. So are you guys, in a sense, like a lot of companies like in your situation, waiting for an FDA tick of approval?
Absolutely, that's the gate that you need. You can't treat patients without an approval from a regulatory body, and we work very closely with those from very early on in the process to make sure that we're on the right path, so that when we get to the penultimate hurdle, there are no surprises, and we certainly know to address the sorts of things that they're expecting to see.
Now, I know it's only guesswork, but have you guys established your best case scenario timeline in dealing with the FDA?
Well, our FDA interactions are frequent and constant across all of our programs. I think in the best case scenario, if you're talking about approvals, instead of maybe, typically from where we are now, a company like ours looking to address, bigger markets with other types of molecules, they could expect maybe 7 to 10 years. But I think what I'm saying is we're doing, maybe 12 to 18 months before we're in a pivotal study, which could be, bottom line is this could be half of that time. It could be, instead of 7 to 10 years, could be half of that time before this thing is ready to put in front of the regulators, hopefully for a rubber stamp.
What's it like to be?
It's going well.
Steve, what's it like to be a CEO of a company, where you have great belief in your product, but you're kind of champing at the bit to try and take it to market? And what's it like to be in that sort of that waiting zone to ultimately get that tick of approval, despite the fact we know how important the FDA testings are, because we don't want to take the wrong kind of drug to market. But from your point of view, if you have the belief that it's the right kind of drug, what's it like to be in that sort of waiting zone?
I'd say rather than waiting, it's more one of preparation, and it is what it is. So yeah, it's frustrating, and I'm a guy who's in a hurry. We're going as fast as we can, knowing that ultimately it's the regulators who determine what to rubber stamp. And it's just about working methodically backwards from that and working out what we need to do and working through it. It's never a boring day because there's always plenty to do, but it's all about what the regulators say. It doesn't matter what they say. It's like me having an argument with my wife. It doesn't matter who's right or wrong.
You don't go any further.
With the regulator.
Don't go any further. But I guess another question, I always try to think, well, people watching this would be having these sort of questions. Why don't you just simply get your drug approved in Australia and say the UK, rather than relying on the pretty tough FDA system?
I think that's a reasonable question. In order to get into the clinic, the hurdles are sometimes lower in Australia, and that's what we're pursuing. That's exactly, which one of our drugs, PTX 100, we're working under an FDA license, but basically having the trial run in Australia. With our cell therapies, we can get into humans, we think, perhaps a lot quicker, and so working under the Australian thing. When it comes to the pointy end, we're actually seeing a large degree of harmonisation across the different regulatory regimes. So what seems to be accepted by, let's say, the FDA tends to be accepted by the Europeans and the Australians as well. So I think we're seeing a lot less difference at the pointy end.
Okay, mate. Is there anything else you think someone should know if they're thinking about looking at your company? What else do you think they should know?
I think I would be very wary of companies with, say, single products or single projects, because I think you need to treat this almost like an investment portfolio, which is having a portfolio of different approaches and different technologies to mitigate risk and also to provide value for value creation, opportunities for value creation. I think the second thing I would say is that you need to look at the pedigree of the technology. And with Prescient, there's a real sleep at night factor, knowing that we've got the best technologies from the best institutes, Yale, University of Pennsylvania, Oxford University, and so on. So we work with the best, we license from the best. So there's a large degree of comfort sleeping at night with that technology. And I'd also be looking at how far ahead of are these Me Too type of technologies? Does it need to compete with other types of approaches that are similar in the market? Or does this stand alone? And Prescient has very differentiated. We've got 7 different programs going on now, any of them as company maker, all of them producing data with momentum. And each of them is a very, very differentiated product. And in terms of Omnicar, our immunotherapy technology, that is a genuine platform. So definitely not all the eggs in one basket. That's yielded 3 programs out of the 7 for us, but we can partner with anyone. Peter, we would like to be the Intel chip inside everyone else's computer. So I think between those things, they're the types of things that people should be looking at. And if it ticks all of those boxes, I would then be looking at the enterprise value of the company and looking to see how stretched it might be. And with Prescient, I think our investment metrics are still very undemanding. We've certainly had a good run over the last year or so, but still a long way to go.
Stephen, thanks for joining us and good luck.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.